I'm Joshua de Lisle and welcome to the DIY power hammer upgrade video. She's a beast! So I want to begin by saying a massive thank you for everyone who said the most loveliest comments in the last video, and also since releasing the patterns for the power hammer, the amount of people who have contributed into buying one is really blessed me mightily. You know, you value what I'm doing here, and that's really built up my confidence and really inspired me to keep doing this and to keep making more. And I really hope that these power hammers really serve you well. So whatever you need, whatever you any problems or difficulties you might have, just feel free to contact me at any point, because I want you to have as much success, if not more, than what I can achieve. So thank you. And also just to update on future videos before we get stuck in, I'm making a stag sculpture next as part of another welding series. But the next video related to the power hammer will be lots more tool making. So I've got tools to make all the flowers really quickly, my acorn key rings really quickly, and a few other different tools, cut-off tools, punching tools, die, and lots of different dies like that. Anyway, let me show you the journey on how I made this do what it does now. Trialed and tested. Hope you enjoy. Leave a comment, and if you want to see more, do subscribe. Right then, so the first modification or upgrade, for me, this might not be the same for you depending on the type that you get, but it's the quick exhaust valve. Now, I've modified this because that hole there was nowhere near big enough for the output that I wanted. So quite simply, all I did is I bored it out to the maximum depth that I could get from it without it hindering its performance. Because I think it was something like a 10mm hole when it could have been a 20mm hole. And so for everything to work quickly, it needs to have good airflow. So any restrictions like that need to be adjusted, which is why I'm going to be upgrading all the pipework and everything else on this power hammer. Number one. So the other main component to the power hammer is the cylinder. So we've got our quick exhaust valves, they're absolutely essential, but the actual power box is this thing here. Now this is a 2.5 inch or 63mm bore size by 250mm stroke length. And I found that to be the most ideal suited for the common type of compressor that you're probably going to be able to get your hands on for the maximum power rating. But there's one problem that many of you spotted in the last video that it has, and that is when you're exceeding full power at 120 psi, when the piston goes full extension, it knocks on the end here, and it would be a concern that it would wear the piston, the cylinder, wear it out quite considerably. So there's a hack that I'm going to do to this now that will stop that from happening and extend the life of your cylinder. So let's take it apart, shall we, and see actually how it all works. So as you can see, there's not much to a cylinder. It's essentially a rod with a piston on the end of it. So it's sealed off by an O-ring, and then you've got this plastic washer here, if you like, that kind of helps guide it in and out of the cylinder. So what happens is at full extension, this part here is smashing up against this part here, which is going to cause some wear and tear. So what I've managed to get hold of is some of this. This is ballistic rubber. This is used in things like engine mounts and things that take on a huge amount of vibration and impact. It's very impact absorbing material. So essentially what I'm going to do is cut a washer out of this to fit the outside bore size of the cylinder and the inside of the rod, so it'll sit against there nice and snugly, and that will take all the punishment from the piston as it hits against it. So simply what I've done is I've made a template, and I'm now going to cut this on the little table saw, the fret saw. Hopefully this will increase the life of the cylinder exponentially. Okay, so here's the washer. I've given it a nice sand just to get it to fit just perfectly inside the cylinder there. But what I'm going to do first is just give it a spray with a silicone based lubricant. Which is good for rubber parts and things like that. And that should pop in there nicely. So it's good to have a nice tight fit so that it stays in the same position and doesn't want to move away from that position, if you see what I mean. So that it's not going to keep dropping down in the cylinder, basically. Now when you're assembling cylinders, it's a very good idea to keep all kind of grit and dirt out of it if you can. It's always a good idea, otherwise it'll act like an abrasion inside your cylinder and will wear it out even more so. So I'm going to reassemble this now. The biggest thing that's going to make this more powerful though is airflow. The more air I can get into the cylinder quickly means that it will work faster, and its acceleration times the weight that gives you the impact force. So you want to increase the airflow as much as possible. So the pipe that I was using was this standard compressor pipe here, which isn't thick enough. It's just not got the airflow that we need, and also it's not fireproof. So what I've done is I've chosen copper pipe. Now copper has very good strength. It will put up with the forces that are needed, and it's fireproof and it won't rust, so it's all good really. So I'm now going to do a bit of plumbing work. And you can see I've already pre-drilled into the pillars here and put some grommets in there ready for the copper pipe. And that means that I can actually hide a lot of the pipe work inside it, which will look really, really clean and tidy. So I'm excited about that, and I'm going to start plumbing. So I've upgraded all the fittings to 1/2 inch and upgraded the copper pipe to 15mm copper pipe, which should give excellent airflow. The only problem there is all the foot pedals that I can find are all 1/4 inch, which isn't ideal. Now I have actually placed on order a new valve that I'll have to adapt to become a foot pedal. But in the meantime, what I've done is I've got some fittings for the foot pedal, and there'll basically be some reducers that go into these. So these are 1/4 inch, and then I'll eventually get them to fit the 15mm pipe. So what I want to do though is disappear these pipes into the framework. So the first thing I want to do is take a template of how these pipes align on the foot pedal here. So I simply got a piece of paper, and if I rub with my thumb, because it's dirty, I've now got a template that I can mark onto the framework, where I can drill my holes ready to take the copper pipe. Okay, so now that we've done all the plumbing again, let's repressurize the system and test for any leaks. The best way to do that is to use a simple solution of washing up liquid and water. And basically where there are any leaks, you'll see bubbles if you can't already hear it. So let's turn on the air pressure. That says, what does that say? 90 psi roughly. I can't hear any leaks, which is a very good sign. But let's just spray some of this on any of the joints and see if any bubbles appear. So that's really good news. No bubbles. That is fantastic. Well, there you go. So if you did have a leak, if I just crack this joint here, you should see bubbles appear. There you go. That's what you'll see if you have a leak. So if ever you're in doubt of like leaking gas or anything like that with the rest of your welding gear, it's a very simple solution, very cheap solution as well. There we go. So let me just show you the difference of the pipe that I've got. You see that? So 15mm compared to what is 6mm. Right, so I just ran a couple of tests with it, and it's not performing as well as it should be. Now there are two things that I think that it could be, and that is that the washer, or the cushion, if you like, that I've put inside the cylinder is restricting the airflow, so I might have to take all of that apart and cut the centre of it to make a wider orifice. Or the other thing that it could be is I've bought a cheap regulator and dryer. After a bit of research, I've noticed that although different regulators can do the same output of PSI, pounds per square inch, they do have different CFM ratings, meaning the cubic foot per minute. So what that means is they'll put out the same pressure, the regulated pressure, but the actual volume of air is different between different regulators. So I didn't really think about that. So one of the first things that I'm going to change is to take the regulator off completely and have it directly linked into the compressor, and then hopefully it will have improved its performance, not hindered it. But anyway, I thought I'd just show you how it's performing at the moment so we can see a side-by-side comparison. It's a little louder as well, and that's because the mufflers that it had on it have actually broken. That's not a good thing. I have got spare ones which I will put on it, but why they've broke, it might be all the shock that's going through the whole system, or it could be just so much pressure that they're getting forced off. So there you go. Still works, but I want it to be more powerful, well, quicker. The idea is it increases its speed. That's the idea, that's what we're aiming for. So far, that isn't fast enough. I think it could be the cushion. Okay, so I've just taken the regulator off. Now, I always had this set on maximum anyway, which is about 120 psi. But I think this system can actually cope without one of these. I'm never really going to regulate it that much. And also the water content can actually drain out of the foot pedal. The foot pedal has exhaust and there is a back pressure that blows out. So I'm not too worried about moisture content in the pipes. I think it will clear its own throat. The only other addition that I think I'm going to do to this is have a ball valve here, just so I can turn the power hammer off separate to the main airline for the compressor tools. And now the compressor tools do need to be regulated, and there's an oiler for that system as well. And all moisture needs to be taken out of that system, otherwise you'll start damaging your tools. But for the power hammer, I don't think it's entirely necessary. There will be some moisture content going in, but like I said, it'll clear its own throat. So let's see if that has made a big difference, taking out the cheap regulator. I'm not entirely convinced. It's not a big deal taking all of this apart and having a look inside it. It's really good that you can do that. I mean, how many people know how to fix their power hammers these days? It just takes a little while to align everything and just get it all calibrated in. That's the only thing. Right, let's do this. Let's get it done. Right, so I'm glad I opened it up because obviously didn't clean that rubber washer very well, and it left a lot of kind of tiny rubbery particles all messing up the inside of the cylinder. It's not an issue, rubber won't really harm it. I'll take it, just got to give it a good wipe, a proper clean up after. If you want to see that a bit closer, right, so the air comes into here and basically fills that chamber at that point, which so all the air is coming out of this gap here. So the socket that I've made, can you see how close that is? I mean, I know it's the same orifice as there, but if I just take 10 mil away, I reckon that will help a bit more. I've made another template, and that is how much I'm taking off that inner ring there. So just a bit of industrial Pritt stick, extra strength grade. Right, there we go. Now I've washed it with nice warm soapy water, a gentle rub with some baby wipes, and a brisk dry on a nice clean towel. Hopefully it won't leave a mess inside the cylinder anymore. So I've just bolted the hammerhead back onto the cylinder, and now I'm going to align everything and make sure everything stays in place using the roller skate wheel pillars, if you like. But I thought this would be a good opportunity to just explain a couple of things about the build of this power hammer. So in pneumatics, what you would normally do is where the top of the cylinder enters into the part that you want to reciprocate, if you see what I mean, is you would actually thread the top of this and then put the locking bolt, the nut on afterwards, or have the locking nut underneath. So you thread the rod into the piece, and then the locking nut holds everything there properly. But it's a fine thread, and I didn't have the correct tap with me, so I ended up just going, it'll be alright, I'll drill a hole through it. And that's had a benefit, but it's also a bit of a minus, because there isn't enough of the shoulder on that rod to really hold it properly. So ideally you'd want to thread that, and in the power hammers that we manufacture, that's exactly what you'll get. You'll get a machine threaded tapped hole for the cylinder to go into. It's worked within my favour not doing that because of the level of adjustment within it. So the power hammers that we manufacture, they'll all be perfectly aligned and you won't have any problems. Because this was made in my own workshop as a prototype, I wanted just a little bit of play. It's been working fine. And whilst we talk about the build and the structure of everything, this is how if you're going to build this yourself with exactly to the drawings that I gave you, then this is what you need to do. What you need to do is align the hammerhead and the anvil first. Have those together first. So put stiffeners around it so all of this is in line. And what I actually did is I tacked my anvil and hammer together. So whilst I had the bracing around it, there was a time where I needed to get round the side. So I thought, I'm just going to tack these two bits together. And then all I did is I broke those tacks after, and it was fine. So once you've got the hammerhead and the anvil in place, upright, perfectly aligned, then what you need to do is get the correct spaces for the brackets here. So I actually bolted the brackets to my cylinder first, and what I did is actually put like a layer of card, like a thin or a thick piece of paper in between, which meant that when I undid it after welding, there was a little bit of play for me to take the cylinder back out again. That's really important because you don't want that getting stuck. So I did that, and then what I did is, whilst the brackets were bolted to the cylinder, I had some spaces around the laser cut, which is made really accurately, and then I had those against the hammerhead. So then I knew that the hammerhead and the cylinder were very, very well aligned, and that was because I used some really accurately made spaces to go around the gap there. So that's very important. And then I welded the top plate to the hammerhead. Moving on. A big question would be, to keep everything aligned, some people had doubts that these skateboard wheels would hold it enough, because if it goes off at a tangent or there is shaking involved within the hammer, there could be damage and wear and tear on the cylinder. But as you can see, as long as you make it correctly first, things should be quite good. And then what we do is we then put on these support brackets. So these go either side like so. And they've got to really hold the hammerhead really tight. So what I like to do is put a clamp either side, really clamping those wheels to the hammerhead. And what that does is it stops you forcing it out of alignment. So we're already aligned, we just need to hold it there. So what you don't want to do is be adjusting these, forcing the hammerhead left and right to get it where it wants to be. It should already be like that. Because the problem is if you do start pushing it towards one side or the other, you're actually flexing the cylinder, and that's where it'll break, if it breaks. So let me show you now how I've clamped this together. So I've got a central clamp here, which aims to the middle of where, in between the two wheels either side. And what that does is it finds the fulcrum point, if you like. So all these wheels are now having equal pressure on the hammerhead. So it's all perfectly aligned, and to help keep everything steady, I've put another clamp here down by the dies. So all I've got now is my bolts. They go straight in like so. Top and bottom. There. And voila. So all these side bolts that you have, these silly little M6 things, they're not to adjust anything. You don't put pressure on these. All they do is they lock in place the pressure that we've now put on the hammerhead. So this clamp is holding these in with pressure, and all you want to do is just tighten these up to hit the inner bolts and lock them in place, and all that does is it stops anything it coming loose, stop it widening again. So it's very simple really, and it only takes that little M6 bolt to do that. But you don't want to use this to adjust it, otherwise, like I said earlier, you'll be putting pressure on the cylinder, and that's not what you want. You want it to rest how it wants to be, if you see what I mean. So also it's worth noting that when welding the 100mm round, the 4-inch section, it's a larger mass of steel, and what you should do is preheat it before welding. And the reason is, all that mass, it sucks all the heat out. So rather than the energy going into melting the weld pool and creating that good penetration that you want, it's almost sucking that heat to preheat itself anyway, meaning you're not getting a good quality weld. And what can happen is the weld will contract. When you lay a bead of weld down, it's expanded with the heat, and then as it cools it contracts. And if things don't contract at the same rate, what that will happen is the weld will just split itself apart. You'll have cracks. And that's not what you want. So to have everything moving at the same pace, you would preheat the larger steel sections, and then when you've laid that bead down, everything cools down at the same rate and you don't get the cracks. Or, I say with a bit of a cheeky grin, you can keep welding and cracking will appear. You can keep grinding that out and weld a bit more, and essentially what you're doing is putting lots more heat into it until the cracks completely disappear. But then you're wasting electrodes, so I don't recommend that. So finally, before we turn this power hammer on and we have a good play with it now, I just want to show you what I've bought, and that is these new air mufflers. Now I chose plastic ones instead of the traditional sintered version because these were cracking right around the seam here, and being a sintered metal part, they're not good for heavy vibration and the kind of wear that these things are going under. So I'm thinking that plastic has better properties for this hammer. And I also think they look really nice. And if you're interested in buying the same type that I have, I've left a link in the description below. So the other thing that I've had in the post recently is the new valve. So if I can show you what that looks like this. So I've got 1/2-inch connections, and as you can see, that will deliver excellent airflow, and it's a simple push and pull switch, just like that. And all I've got to do is put a foot pedal on the end of this with a spring so it keeps it up, and then as in when I want to use it to do the reciprocation of the hammer, it's just a push down simply with a pedal at that point. And the good thing about these is the button is threaded, so I can easily put a nut on there and attach it like so, which is ideal. Now I'm going to stick to the original foot pedal for now, but it works absolutely fine. You don't need to worry about it so much. But for optimization, those are my recommendations.